so good, and I loved it, and it had me in a way that, like, a lot of books haven't gotten me, like, that intensely into it. Like, I don't know, it was different. I get very into my books that I love, but this one had me by the throat. It's so sweet and wholesome, and it follows a character. Well, one of the characters in here is a character from that you meet in the Caravel series, and so it was really fun to see a book more about them. But let's get right into it. I'm so excited to read this to you. I love it very much. But we are going to start with, it's like a prologue of sorts. As a really beautiful map, I would show you the map. It's really pretty and very storybooky. It's of the magnificent north, but there are, actually I'll just cover them. Under my fingers are mermaids, but they're not adequately covered, so I will cover them for you. What? There's a little idea of it. I love it. It's so cool. I love maps. But we are going to start with, it's a prologue of sorts. It's called Warnings and Signs. The bell hanging outside the curiosity shop knew the human was trouble from the way he moved through the door. Bells have excellent hearing, but this little chime didn't need any particular skill to catch the crude jingle of the gaudy pocket watch chain in this young man's hip, or the rough scrape of his boots as he attempted a swagger, but only succeeded in scuffing the floor of Maximilian's curiosities, whimsies, and other oddities. The young man was going to ruin the girl that worked inside the shop. The bell had tried to warn her. A full 2 seconds before the boy opened the door, the bell rang its clapper. Unlike most humans, this shop girl had grown up around oddities, and the bell had long suspected she was a curiosity as well, though it couldn't figure out exactly what sort. The girl knew that many objects were more than they appeared, and that bells possessed a sixth sense that humans lacked. Unfortunately, this girl, who believed in hope and fairy tales and love at first sight, often misinterpreted the bell's chimes. Today, the bell was fairly certain that she had heard its cautionary ring, but from the way her voice affected an excited edge, as she spoke to the young man, it seemed as if the girl had taken the bell's early toll as a serendipitous sign instead of as a warning. Part 1. A Tale of Evangeline Fox. Chapter 1. The Whisper Gazette. Where will the broken-hearted pray now? By Cutlass Nightlinger. The door to the Prince of Hearts church has disappeared. Painted the deep blood red of broken hearts, the iconic entry simply vanished from one of the temple district's most visited churches sometime during the night, leaving behind an impenetrable marble wall. It's now impossible for anyone to enter the church. Evangeline shoved the dewy gold newsprint into the pocket of her flowered skirt. The door at the end of this decrepit alley was barely taller than she was, and hidden behind a rusted metal grate instead of covered in beautiful blood-red paint. But she would bet her father's curiosity shop that this was the missing door. Nothing in the The gossip sheet in her pocket had first announced that the door from the Prince of Hearts church had gone missing. Few imagined it was magic. It was the scandal sheet's first article, and the people said it was part of the hoax to sell subscriptions. Doors didn't simply disappear. But Evangeline believed that they could. The story hadn't felt like a gimmick to her. It felt like a sign, telling her where to search if she was going to save her heart and the boy that it belonged to. She may not have seen much evidence of magic outside of the oddities in her father's curiosity shop, but she had faith in it. It existed. Her father, Maximilian, had always spoken of magic as if it were real, and her mother had been from the magnificent north, where there was no difference between fairy tales and history. All stories are made of both truth and lies, she used to say. What matters is the way we believe in them. And Evangeline had the gift when it came to believing in things that others considered myths, like the immortal fates. She opened the metal gate. Great. The door itself didn't have a handle, forcing her to wedge her fingers into the tiny space between its jagged edge and the dirty stone wall. The door pinched her fingers, drawing a drop of blood, and she swore she heard its splintered voice say, "Do you know what you're about to step into? Nothing but heartbreak will come from this." But Evangeline's heart was already broken, and she understood the risk she was taking. She knew the rules for visiting fated churches. Always promise less than you can give, for fates take more. Do not make bargains with more than one fate, and above all, never fall in love with a fate. There were 16 immortal fates, and they were jealous and possessive beings before they vanished centuries ago. It was said they ruled over part of the world with magic that was as malevolent as it was marvelous. They never broke a bargain, although they often hurt the people they helped. Yet most people, even if they believed that fates were mere myths, became desperate enough to pray to them at some point. Evangeline had always been curious about their churches, but she had known enough about the serial nature of fates and fated bargains to avoid seeking their places of worship. Until 2 weeks ago, when she had become one of the desperate people that the stories always cautioned about. "Please," she whispered to the heart-shaped door, filling her voice with the wild, battered hope that had led her here. "I know you're a clever little thing, but you allowed me to find you. Let me in." She gave the wood a final tug. This time, the door opened. Evangeline's heart raced as she took her first step. During her search for the missing door, she read the Prince of Hearts church held a different aroma for everyone who visited. It was supposed to smell like the person's greatest heartbreak. But as Evangeline entered the cool cathedral, the air did not remind her of Luke. It had no hints of suede or vetiver. The dim mouth of the church was slightly sweet and metallic. Apples and blood. Goose flesh covered her arms. It was not reminiscent of the boy she loved. The account she'd read must have been wrong. But she didn't turn around. She knew fates weren't saints or saviors, although she hoped that the Prince of Hearts was more feeling than the others. Her steps took her deeper inside the cathedral. Everything was shockingly white. White carpets, white candles, white prayer pews of white oak, white aspen, and flaked white birch. Evangeline passed row after row of mismatched white benches. They might have been handsome ones, but now many had missing legs, while others had mutilated cushions or benches that had been broken in half. Broken. No wonder the door hadn't wanted her to enter. Perhaps this church wasn't sinister. It was sad. A rough rip shattered the church's silence. Evangeline spun around and choked back a gasp. Several rows behind her, in a shadowed corner, a young man appeared to be mourning or performing some sort of act of penance. Wild locks of gold hair hung across his face as his head bowed and fingers tore at the sleeves of his burgundy topcoat. she had until Luke's wedding. She hurried down the nave to the apse, where the fractured rows of benches ceased, and a gleaming marble dais rose before her. The platform was pristine, lit by a wall of beeswax candles and surrounded by 4 fluted columns, guarding a larger-than-life statue of the fated Prince of Hearts. The back of her neck prickled. Evangeline knew what he was supposed to look like. Decks of Destiny, which had faded images to tell fortunes, had recently become a popular item in her father's curiosity shop. The Prince of Hearts card represented unrequited love, and it always depicted the Faye as tragically handsome, with vivid blue eyes crying tears that matched the blood forever staining the corner of his sulking mouth. There were no bloody tears on the glowing statue, but its face did possess a ruthless kind of beauty, the sort Evangeline would have expected from a demigod that had the ability to kill with his kiss. The prince's marble lips twisted into a perfect smirk that should have looked cold and hard and sharp, but there was a hint of softness in his slightly fuller lower lip. It pouted out like a deadly invitation. According to the myth, the Prince of Hearts was not capable of love because his heart had stopped beating long ago. Only one person could make his heart work again, his one true love. They said his kiss was fatal to all but her, his only weakness. And he'd saw her, he'd left a trail of corpses. Evangeline couldn't imagine a more tragic existence. If one fate were to have sympathy for her situation, it would be the Prince of Hearts. Her gaze found his elegant marble fingers clasping a dagger the size of her forearm. The blade pointed down towards a stone offering basin balanced on a burner, just above a low circle of dancing white flames. The words, "Blood for a prayer," were carved into its inside. Evangeline took a deep breath. This is what she'd come for. She pressed her fingers to the tip of the blade. Sharp marble pierced her skin, and drop after drop of blood fell, sizzling, hissing, and filling the air with more metallic and sweet. A part of her hoped this tithe could conjure up some sort of magical display, that the statue would come to life, or the Prince of Hearts' voice would fill the church, but nothing moved save for the flames on the wall of the candles. She couldn't even hear the anguished young man in the back of the church. It was just her and the statue. "Dear Prince," she started halting. She'd never prayed to a fate. She didn't want to get it wrong. "I'm here because my parents are dead." Evangeline cringed. That was not how she was supposed to start. What I meant to say was, my parents have both passed away. I lost my mother a couple years ago. Then I lost my father last season. Now I'm about to lose the boy I love. Luke Navarro. Her throat closed as she said the name and pictured his crooked smile. Maybe if he'd been plainer, or poorer, or crueler, none of this would have happened. We've been seeing each other in secret. I was supposed to be in mourning for my father. Then, a little over 2 weeks ago, on the day that Luke and I were going to tell our families we were in love, my stepsister, Marisol, announced that she and Luke were getting married. Evangeline paused to close her eyes. This part made her head spin. Quick engagements weren't uncommon. Marisol was pretty, and although she was reserved, she was also kind. So much kinder than Evangeline's stepmother, Agnes. But Evangeline had never even seen Luke in the same room as Marisol. I know how this sounds, but Luke loves me. I believe he's been cursed. He hasn't spoken to me since the engagement was announced. He won't even see me. I don't know how she did it, but I'm certain this is all my stepmother's doing. Evangeline didn't actually have proof that Agnes was a witch and she cast a curse on Luke, but Evangeline was certain her stepmother had learned of Evangeline's relationship with Luke, and she'd wanted Luke in the title he'd someday inherit for her daughter instead. Agnes has resented me ever since my father died. I've tried talking to Marisol about Luke. Unlike my stepmother, I don't think Marisol would ever intentionally hurt me. doing is today, and I need you to stop it. Evangeline opened her eyes. The lifeless statue hadn't changed. She knew statues didn't generally move, yet she couldn't help but think that it should have done something. Shifted or spoken or moved its marble eyes. Please, I know you understand heartbreak. Stop Luke from marrying Marisol. Save my heart from breaking again. Now that was a pathetic speech. 2 slow claps followed the indolent voice, which sounded just a few feet away. Evangeline spun around, all the blood draining from her face. She didn't expect to see him, the young man who had been tearing his clothes in the back of the church. Although it was difficult to believe that was the same person, she had thought the boy was in agony. But he had ripped away his pain along with the sleeves of his jacket, which now hung in tatters over a striped black and white shirt that was only halfway tucked into his breeches. He sat on the day's steps, lazily leaning against one of the pillars, with his long, lean legs stretched out before him. His hair was golden and messy. His 2 bright blue eyes were bloodshot, and his mouth twitched at the corner as if he didn't enjoy much. But he found pleasure in the brief bit of pain he just inflicted upon her. He looked bored and rich and cruel. Would you like me to stand up and turn around so that you can take in the rest of me? He taunted. The color instantly returned to Evangeline's cheeks. We're in a church. What does it have to do with anything? And in one elegant move, the young man reached into the inner pocket of his ripped burgundy coat, pulled out a pure white apple, and took one bite. Dark red juice dripped from the fruit on his long, pale fingers and then to the pristine marble steps. Don't do that! Evangeline hadn't meant to yell. Although she wasn't shy with strangers, she generally avoided quarreling with them. But she couldn't seem to help it when this crass young man, "You're being disrespectful. And you're praying to an immortal who kills every girl he kisses. You really think he deserves any reverence?" The awful young man punctuated his words with another wide bite of his apple. She tried to ignore him. She really did. But it was like some terrible magic had taken hold of her. Rather than marching off, Evangeline imagined the stranger taking her lips instead of his snack and kissing her with his fruit-sweet mouth until she died in his arms. No, it couldn't be. You're staring again, he purred. Evangeline immediately looked away, turning back to the marble statue. Minutes ago, its lips alone had made her heart race, but now it seemed like an ordinary statue, lifeless compared to the vicious young man. Personally, I think I'm far more handsome. Suddenly, the young man stood right beside her. Butterflies fluttered to life inside Evangeline's stomach. Scared ones, all frantic wings and 2 fast beats, warning her to get out of there, to run, to flee, but she couldn't look away. This close, he was undeniably attractive, and taller than she'd realized. He'd given her a real smile, revealing a pair of dimples that briefly made him look more angel than devil. But she imagined even angels would need to beware of him. But she imagined